Who am I and why I'm here are two of the most important questions, or if not the most asked questions on the planet. I know I've asked it many times before, and I have had a few answers or conclusions as time has gone on. Knowing where I belong, with whom, of course, my tribe, my people, has helped orientate myself and in some ways provided value and identity. Has given me value and identity. Now, it's madness to think that you could determine your value by the company you keep, but it does in some way provide a projected trajectory of where you could end up or what value you could add to the world. For example, I'm surrounded by a group of disruptors, creative disruptors, truth seekers, people who do not see the status quo and say that is it. There's always something more. And there's always ways in which we can provide value and add value to the world. So, even grabbing a cup of coffee is something. It's not just grabbing a cup of coffee. It starts with talking about better service delivery or customer service, especially if you had any bad experience with bad service, customer service. We can always find a way to do it better. And then seamlessly segueing into deeper thoughts about life, like the meaning of life. How are you doing? How can you add value to life? And that's just based off a cup of coffee. So we're always looking for moments and conversations on how we can do better and add value to the world around us, never leaving it the same. So in that sense, my value to the world is greater because of my friends and the company that I keep. So our value as a group of friends is not set by our net worth or degrees, but is measured by what value we believe we can add to the world and make it better. So in the first two episodes, we'll be talking about the two fundamental questions. Who am I and why am I here? I'm Jason Skippers, and welcome to Things We Learn on a Monday Morning, a podcast about my learnings and a conversation with people who've learned as well. Now, the purpose of this podcast is it's a short series where I'm going to engage with people, my friends, about learnings that I've walked through and learnings that they've learned the same. So the topics will be the same. But I thought, let me kick it off. And what better way to kick it off than with the topic of identity? Who am I? So the first question is, who am I? I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a South African. I'm a person, a creative collaborator, a creative disruptor, a podcast producer, a recording engineer, a music producer. All of these are multiple things that I've put my hands into and help shape and define, in essence, who I am. Now, bearing in mind, things that I do are not defining of who I am, but just expressions of who I am and what I do. Also, one thing I forgot to mention, I'm also the ministry head, the creative arts coordinator. So I'm in charge of music, technical sound at my local church. So I'm in charge of people, or running with people and help growing a ministry and an organization. So I deal with a lot of people all the time. And so there's multiple hats on which I have at the same time. But I love it. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about music. I'm passionate about the arts. And I believe the arts have a means of holding a mirror up to the world and to allow it to evolve and change and respond and grow. And so the arts plays a key role in this beautiful expression. And so that's pretty much part of who I am and why I am. And part of this podcast is me expressing and providing creativity in a space and inviting you into my world. So hope you enjoy it. And so that's who I am. How do I define identity? And like I mentioned earlier, identity is the deep intrinsic values or essence which is expressed through things that you do and how you show up, but it's not defined by it. So in other words, me being a music producer, a podcast producer, a sound engineer, a team leader are functions, but not definitions of who I am, because what I do can change, but who I am will remain the same. So how I show up in those spaces and my values and my core values and my intrinsic essence that shows up in those spaces, that's who I am. not the particular positions that I hold. That's not the definition of who I am. I'm also a believer, a follower of Jesus. I love Jesus. I believe in the local church, and I believe that our identity is found in Him and is defined by Him. And so we were created as good. And yes, we can go down this whole conversation. That's probably another podcast. And yes, we needed a savior, and He died the death that we could die, that we needed to die, so we could live eternity with Him. But an amazing God, an all-seeing God, all-loving God, a creator God who would die for you and I, does add value, or determining value and identity of who we are. So if that all-knowing, all-powerful God chose death on the cross so that we can live, surely there's a value that we have, an identity in who we are. So that helps define and helps me show up in the world that I am of value and I have a voice in the space. But ultimately, besides who God is and how God defines who we are and our value, I believe it's also our intrinsic value and essence that defines who we are. So in other words, a key value and that's intrinsic to me is integrity. And support would be another one, but integrity. So my yes is my yes, my no is my no. So if I'm showing up, if I say I'm going to show up and be supportive to you, I will show up and be supportive to you. Sometimes to the detriment of myself, but I will still show up because that's intrinsic. It's a value to me. You spending time with you it's value to me. So these are all core things that when pressure comes, those values come to the fore and my identity comes up. And so being a team leader or a coordinator of people, those are the type of things that come out, especially when things are intense. Being a producer, podcast producer, just speaking in those spaces, working with many different clients, time is a value to me, and valuing your time is important. So therefore I show up in those spaces. So that's what comes through. So like I said, expressions and what I do are just expressions of who I am, but not determining factors of who I am. The dictionary definition, or this version of Google's definition of identity, is to establish or indicate who or what someone or something is. The judge ordered the girl should not be identified. This is probably in a court case. This is all Google dictionary definitions. Yay, we love you. Or associate someone or something closely with or regard as having strong links with. Yeah, that's another definition. Another one from dictionary.com says to recognize or establish as being a particular person or thing to verify identity of. So in other words, just who you are. And also it goes further to say to identify handwriting, to identify certain markers, your teeth and all this type of stuff. So there's unique markers of who we are that people can identify who we are. So our writing, penmanship, certain body features or markers, these are all determining factors of who we are for people to identify who we are. But something deeper than just the physical, it is the intrinsic values, or I believe it's the intrinsic values that are clear markers of who we are and our identity. And your community helps you define that in many ways, like I mentioned earlier with the story of the disruptors that I surround myself with. But also they can help you walk out your journey and define who you are. Next question. How important is knowing your identity, and what impact does it have on living life? So it's very, very important to know who you are, because that helps you show up in spaces. And for a long time, I've ignored who I am and silenced my voice in those spaces. To the detriment, as I mentioned earlier, I love supporting people. I love seeing people's dreams come to fruition and being super supportive in that space. But in many times, I've silenced my voice to offset supporting the other person. And in those spaces, I've ended up being frustrated and in many ways not gone after the things that I should have gone after, things I wanted to achieve in my life. But that's a decision on my part. It's not any sort of victim blaming or blaming the other person. It's just a choice that I made. But I needed to come to the realization that I have a voice I have something of value to offer, and you can offer it. And so that's why this podcast exists, or the series exists. These are the learnings, and I'm getting to express it in my creative way, or the way that I want to express it, for you to, I guess, journey with me on this. But it's important that I needed to find my voice, and in finding my voice, being forced to walk away from a few things to this space, I'm able to better be present in supporting other people, because I know what voice I have. I know my strengths. I know what's out of my wheelhouse, if you want to put it that way. But I know my voice, and I know I can show up in those spaces and be present and be supportive and see the success of other people, because I know my voice and I know what I carry. But before, I was just adjusting to what was needed for the space, and things were successful, but I was adjusting to what was needed in the space and not going after and being intentional about what I needed to do. And so I needed a disruption in my space to show up. And so it's very, very important. And so not knowing who you are and what you carry, and can be what that means, that may sound vague, but in terms of that's that skill set, essence, thought process, worldview, thinking, all of those types, how you show up in those spaces. That's what I'm referring to. What in terms of what you carry, knowing how you're able to show up and add value. That's your voice. Knowing that will deeply enrich your life, deeply enrich your connection with people, but also deeply enrich the opportunities and create more opportunities for you to add value in life. Yeah. Not knowing who you are just allows you, will keep you searching, and you'll just be coasting and always plugging into other things and be unfulfilled, or at least partially fulfilled. So it's important that you show up and find your voice and show up in those spaces. So there's certain people I had to walk away from, certain things I had to walk away from, certain, pull up your big boy pants and start something new, start something fresh, like this podcast is important. So being able to show up in these spaces and doing these things is very, very, very important, and part of me showing my voice. In this segment, we'll look at gadgets or apps that make our lives a bit easier, or at least enjoyable. And in this episode, we'll look at the one app or gadget that helped me a lot, particularly with my tasks, and it's called Trello. Now, Trello is a task management tool, that's what I would call it, that helps me organize my life and the multiple entities that I'm involved in and responsible for. So what my Trello board looks like, and that's the cool thing about this product or app, is that you're able to organize a few things that I've organized into the different silos, the different entities. So I've got NPC, which I've started. I've got my business, Create Influence. I've got the church, Creative Arts Ministry, with its multiple other columns and multiple teams below. So I'm responsible for people and teams. And each silo has tasks, and a daily task and a weekly task column, and I'm able to shift it in between and then archive it. And I think that's the beauty of this tool, is that the feeling of archiving, when you just archive and the task disappears, it's like, yeah, I've achieved. So that makes my mood feel a bit great, feel better, so I've achieved something. But also it helps me keep sane with all the tasks that needs to happen. And also the cool thing about this app also is you can add dates to it, timelines, people who's responsible for things. You can color code it so it can be an absolute beautiful picture to look at. And also inviting people into your boards, and they can see exactly which tasks pertain to them. But it's been a helpful tool in just having to manage and map out the tasks and the people involved for all the things that needs to get done. So like me, hands in multiple pies, or fingers in multiple pies, your administration needs to be on a different level to manage all of these things. So Trello is the one app or gadget that has helped me achieve all the tasks that I need to do. In summary, as I said in the intro, our identity is not determined by our net worth or degrees, but by what and the measure of value we can add to the world when we come together. And it's about you and I showing up with our intrinsic values and beliefs and finding ways that we can add value to the world. That's how we define who we are in those spaces. So I want to be surrounded by people, and I surround myself by people who want to add value to the world and make the world a better place for everyone, not just a select few. So that's how I define who I am. A bringer of hope and a bringer of change. So if you've lost your voice and listened to this episode and thinking, oh man, I don't know who I am. Maybe take some time to find out who you are. And how do you do that? Find ways in which you get excited about adding value to the world, and then you discover who you are. And for those of you that are already in your groove, may you continue to discover who you are and more ways you can add value to the world. But never stop, and never let anyone else tell you that you're less than. Thanks for listening to Things We Learn on a Monday Morning. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.